our guests are trickling in. Welcome everybody for this session that's being hosted by SDN India. How many of you are familiar with Service Design Network? Okay, so quite a few are. So for those of you who don't know, Service Design Network is a global body. It's a volunteer-led organization, and our charter is to promote service design across the globe. We do it in various ways, and you're seeing one such format, which is the webinar that we are conducting today. We earlier used to do a lot of physical meetings, but COVID has said that you need to do something different, and that's why a lot of webinars. I would like to invite Michael Steingress. He's the head of partnerships and sales at More Than Metrics. One of the products they have, a flagship product, is Snaply, which is a customer journey mapping tool. He also teaches at multiple business schools, Austria and France. And he has a passion for maps, but of late, everything has been virtual. So he hasn't got much to do in terms of, putting it into actual practice. So he's doing everything virtually. So over to you, Michael.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks for that introduction. So it's great being here today. Thanks for inviting me for this little online session today. Yes, I do have a passion for maps. That is maybe why I ended up working for Snaply. As we just heard, we're a provider of dedicated software for that. But my background basically is in two things: business and geography alike. That's what I did when I was studying. So that's why my passion for maps is not only tied to journey maps only, though today we won't talk about geographical maps, or mainly we don't, maybe we do, but also mainly on journey maps. So today's topic is a journey map hero case with that little subtitle on how to operationalize journey mapping across organizational silos. And thanks for your introductions, as I structured today's talk in a way that I might recap a little bit on the basics of service design as well, so that all of us are on the same page here. But no worries to the service design professionals. I'll try to keep it short, but still, I guess having that context once again makes just sense when it comes to also talking about how to best operationalize or implement journey maps. So in the end, it will be mainly about the implementation, not only of journey maps, but all of the work that comes with it. But yeah, I won't spoiler you too much before we start. So if we're good to go, I would again share my screen.
Yeah, we're good to go, Michael. The others
perfect.
Can join in, and
Perfect.
the recording will be available in case they've missed something.
Perfect. In case I might not see the Zoom screen here while I'm presenting, so drop your questions to the chat. I'd say that might be the best option to do so, and I'll definitely leave room for a little discussion towards the end. Let's see if I'm able to answer your questions, but in general, this should not be a 1.5 hour monologue of mine, but happy to go into a lively discussion afterwards. And but I would say first things first, and let's kick it off with that little presentation.
Let's hope that we also get a surprise visitor sometime very in the near future, Michael, from your end.
Hopefully. All right, give me a second to share my screen, and then we are already good to go. Whoop. You see my screen again? Hope you do. Perfect.
Yes, we can see.
All right, then let's finally kick it off. Well, that's actually, well, I just talked about that. In other words, you could just say doing is the hardest part in service design, not only, but especially. And that's why we're here today. Let me start with a little background story first. where are we coming from? Why is it me talking here today? What's to expect for you in the upcoming 45 minutes of me talking? Excuse me. Our own journey actually started about 10 years ago, actually even before that, but 10 years ago, we've released our first book, the one that you see on the left. Some of you might have seen it already, called This is Service Design Thinking. When we released the book, service design wasn't new anymore. Still, it wasn't as, well, let's call evolved as it is now, or at least it wasn't a common thing to do. At that time, some of us were already teaching. That was one of the trigger points here. We simply didn't find a piece of literature that we could doubtlessly recommend to our students, and that is why, together with people from the service design community, we've written that book. After that, things started to escalate quite quickly. Lots of organizations reached out to us saying, hey, we've seen your book, can you help us with this and that project? So you might guess it already. At that time, we did project work / consulting work. And rather soonish, we got to the point where we wanted to create and, of course, also deliver journey maps. Again, we didn't find a proper solution. And that, to keep the story short, was the starting point for Mrtp, as we decided to do it ourselves and started coding, basically, and that was the starting point then for the company that we are today, Modern Metrics. So that's simply the legal entity behind the products that we are selling. And as you've already heard, Mrtp, our customer journey mapping solution, is the main one here. 3 years ago, we've released a second book, or actually 2 books. This is Service Design Doing, a more hands-on book with lots of tools and methods and resources, case studies on how to best do service design in your organization or for a customer of yours if you are a consultant. The yellow one, the one next to it, the methods ones, is just complementary to that main book. So that is basically how we share our knowledge. Of course, on top of that, we also do share this knowledge with our customers that do use Mrtp, especially in an enterprise segment. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to talk a little bit more about our software solution here. But that's not why I'm here for today, as it will be about the doing in general, in which, of course, persona, stakeholder maps, journey maps, that's what you see on your screen here now, play an important role. I'll also talk a little bit about when and how to best do that. And on top of that, actually, we'll talk about journey map hierarchies, that an approach that goes a little bit beyond creating mere deliverables. But first things first, so that's what's ahead of you. So a little recap on what is service design. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about standard process versus process standards. It will also be a little bit about consulting versus doing. Don't get me wrong from the beginning. I'm not saying that consulting is not part of the doing, but you'll hear about what I mean here. And then we go into journey map operations / journey map hierarchies. And in the end, as previously said, we're going to have a little Q&A session. If you're wondering where I am, by the way, I'm hailing from Innsbruck in Austria. So I'm, I guess, 4.5 hours behind most of you, at least the ones based in India or in some parts. And well, I hope, and it's great to have you here, even though it's late for some of you already. It's 2:30 here. So yeah, I'm still, well, I had my coffee, and I guess we're good to go for the next 45 minutes. All right, let's start with this one here. What is service design? I won't start talking about that from the very basic on, but at least I suppose that most of you heard about these 4 core activities already. So when we go into service design, or when we try to realize things following a service or design thinking approach, no matter the term here, we often deal with these 4 core activities, from research to ideation to prototyping to implementation. After basically building that bridge in the beginning. I'll mainly talk about the implementation part then, but also have in mind that the tools that I'm going to talk about obviously don't only help you once you get to the implementation point. And as we all know, service design is a flexible / iterative thing. So it does not necessarily mean that you have to start with research. If you have a good idea, do your research, try to see if data proves that your idea is viable, or you might have a prototype, find out, hey, it was a nice idea, doesn't work, go back to research. So never see these things as a linear sequence, so to say. Still, that is what you will find most oftenly: research, ideation, prototyping, and implementation. Let's start with the research part in the beginning. As you know, once you conduct your research, you will have two types of data in the end, ideally. That is quantitative data, numbers, and qualitative data, text, typically. As simple as that. In the end, or how else you could frame it, is quantitative data, numbers, KPIs, they help me to measure performance over time. Whereas on the other hand, qualitative insights or qualitative data will provide me with the actionable insights that I'm needing. Often you might hear sentences like, yeah, 80% of our customers are satisfied with our service. That's great for you. But what's to learn from that? 90 would be better, yeah. But how to get there, how to achieve that, what to do first, what projects to prioritize, which projects to stop, what to pivot, what to review. Numbers don't really tell you that. In the end, you'll need both. And no matter what you do and how you conduct your research, different types of methods and the tools within will lead to different types of data, quantitative, qualitative, as said. So you might do some surveys, A/B testing, or on the qualitative side of things, you might go for some mobile ethnography, whatever that is. In the end, of course, that's a lot of possibilities. I'm totally aware that all of that is hard to realize all at once. You don't have the time, you might not have the budget, you might not have the right people for that. Still, if you go for that, you will see that there are ways of making a decision on what's to do, what not. In the end, what is important, maybe to keep it short and simple here today, is triangulation. What does that mean? Of course, who's a sailor will know what triangulation mean, or whoever is good in math. If you know the simply said, or also in geography, hooray! If you know the location of two different points on a map, and if you know how they are situated relating to each other, you will be able to calculate a third one from there. In our context here, it's as simple as that. Don't use one method only when you do your research. Triangulate. Don't do a survey only. Try to double check on the data that you've created, that you've collected. Data types. Don't build on one data type only. As simple as having quantitative and qualitative data like. Plus, thirdly, don't have one person or team do your research only. People are often biased, see something through their own lenses, might be shaped by whatever condition there is within your organization. That means try to double check, try to counterprove the findings of one team. So in other words, triangulate on methods, data types, and research in order to have data at hand that help you to make proper decisions then. No matter how you do that, that might be surveys. For example, think about when a survey might be, or that is not only applicable to surveys, but there's an example. Don't only think about when to best conduct that. Often surveys are done in the post-service period. Think about a trip that you did and you've stayed in a hotel and you might have had some nice and some bad experiences. And then 2 weeks later, you get that survey you see that survey in your inbox, the hotel asking for, hey, how was it? Well, how was it? Good? But is that the right way to ask? There had been a lot of stuff happening in between, right? Is that really the right time to ask for that? Or should you maybe do it earlier or go for a different method in order to get the data that you want. I could tell stories for each of these, but that will be far too much for today. So let's rather have a look at other things you could do. Typically, to get some quantitative data, you dive into some customer user data that you have. We're a cloud-based solution, for example. Obviously, we monitor user behavior in our software. We have a look at conversion rates. We see how easy people get through the onboarding funnel. Often that obviously results in quantitative data, but obviously on top of that, qualitative data. Like you might go for contextual interviews, expose yourself to a service situation, or in other words, talk to the people why they are really experiencing the service that you're offering, in order to have unbiased data, in order to have data or insights, let's call it this, or get insights at the moment that people are experiencing them, whilst these insights are fresh, so to say. Non-participant observation, so be the fly on the wall, so to say. Observe how are people behaving in a specific service situation, or participate, play the role of one of these customers, work along with different teams. Obviously, no matter what you do, you should always be informed about what your front desk, the front line of your organization, is experiencing, in order to be able to slip into your customer's shoes. And that's why you want that data. Slipping into somebody's shoes requires you to get out of your own shoes first. Get rid of your biases, get rid of your maybe very much shaped point of views on your own business, and thus do proper research in order to allow you to do that. Another thing, auto ethnography, often providing you with qualitative data, people reporting on their experiences on the fly, so to say, or lots of many more methods and tools that you can apply. In the end, what you will get is primary data. That might be a video, that might be a voice recording from an interview, that might be an interview transcript, whatever it is. What you will need to do first is interpret that data, bring that data into a specific context. There are tools like key insights, user stories, jobs to be done. All of these help you to better contextualize the data, the insights that you've gathered. So you get from primary data to interpreted data, and what helps you do that, or what helps you incorporate these interpreted pieces of data, are visualizations, which are often, and that is what I'll mainly talk about today, which are often done in journey maps at different stages throughout your design process. You might start with an assumption-based journey map, for example, and only then verify it with data, or you might have some data already and try to fill the data gaps that suddenly pop up in your journey map, or persona, or system map. That is a simple version of it, why we want to do proper research. By the way, maybe of interest to you, maybe some have read the report, 4 years old already, but still mostly true. If you're familiar with the double diamond concept, in which the first diamond is representing the problem space and the second one the solution space. Also following what we've just heard, you basically diverge twice, you open up, try to gather as much data as you can, obviously challenge related, and then try to nail down the problem before going into solution mode, whereas in which you then try to find proper ideas and prototypes in order to then have the right thing, ideas, projects to tackle in order to improve on the customer experience that you deliver. Sadly, that is what's often true in organizations. Only roughly 5% of the people on your teams are concerned with the work that regards that problem space, whereas a lot of people work in the solution space. Not saying that working in the solution space is bad, but often organizations fail to nail down the actual customers or users or patients or employees, citizens problem. Meaning, proper research is often something that you don't see in organizations. People making decisions based on assumptions. I've seen it too often over the years, and I'm pretty sure most of you will be able to share that experience as well, that in the end, budgets, resources are invested into things that simply build on assumptions where no proper research had been done. assuming you did your research properly, you might want to go into ideation then. So let's say we have our personas, our first draft of these, our stakeholder maps, our journey maps. We want to build on these artifacts that we've created here and go into ideation. What does that mean? We're trying to come up with ideas that help us to tackle a specific problem based on what we've learned so far, as simple as that. How you do that, so you can, that is what maybe some or most of you might have experienced already, a service design workshop, which is great. Often lots of fun, people going or applying different methods and tools in order to, within often a limited time frame, trying to get to specific ideas that they can then further and build some prototypes on. No matter if you do this or if you have, for example, a little idea wall, a picture from the early days of our organization. So we had that in our office. Now we do that digitally. Thanks to Corona, we're all in home office, and that is why physical solutions for that doesn't work. But you're all familiar with whiteboarding tools like Miro or Mural, which perfectly allow you to do that. In the end, I dare to say that ideation is overrated. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for proper ideas, but ideas are cheap. Getting ideas, assuming you include the right people, that is not the big challenge that you're facing. Getting the right ideas might be a challenge then, but coming up with proper ideas, that isn't the rocket science usually. No matter how you do that, there are so many different ways of doing that. You go into a co-creation workshop, you come up with a list of ideas, you then select these, for example, applying an idea portfolio, rate your ideas on 2 scales, for example, how feasible is it to realize that idea and how much impact does it have on my customer's experience. That, I'm not saying it is not a lot of work, but that is usually what's rather easy to achieve. What's often underestimated or underrated is prototyping. That is something that often isn't done. Also, even though you might have very, very professional people in your innovation teams, design departments, still when I talk to our enterprise customer, that is something that they often don't really have anything to tell about, as they have an idea and then they think the idea is cool and then they go for it. Often, as previously said, that results in a huge waste of money or other resources. So prototyping is what you should definitely focus on. And as a little recommendation here, always start with a shitty first draft. Rather fail early and fail cheap, and don't hold back on trying to bring your ideas to a test. What's common sense for industries with tangible goods, they want to test them first. They want to see how do they work, how is it to handle these. Often isn't done in services, surprisingly, still not, even though you can prototype your services as good as you can do with tangible products. By the way, yes, it's a swear word, but actually that's coming from Ernest Hemingway, that once said that the first draft of everything you do will be shit. And that is why we're trying to build on that idea and just try to bring things to the test at an early stage. That might, for example, also be done by creating another journey map, a future state one. Imagine at an earlier stage, you did a current state journey map representing the status quo of your service product that you're delivering and the service that comes with that product, trying to find out what do we know already, where do we have data gaps, where should we do more research, which problems do we need to dive into. And then you might also, based on your ideation and on your ideas, you might want to create a future state journey map, which then represents the to be state of your service, the ideal service that you're trying to reach by everything that you're doing, by the project you then trigger. Comparing a current state and the future state journey map will allow you to more easily do that, find the right projects, prioritize on the right ones, maybe pausing or ditching some of the not so important ones. All of that we're going to hear again about when I talk about the hierarchies. Another prototype that most of us are familiar with, wireframes, dummies, click dummies, bring things to the test at an early stage. Or physical prototypes. That was actually a project that colleagues of ours did in the US a couple of years ago. It was about public transport. Some of you might recognize Adam Lawrence here. So what they did at that time, including some people from our organization, I think it was in Boston, if I remember correctly, it was a project about public transport, and specifically this part of the project was about designing better bus stops. What they did is exactly that. Cardboard prototypes. They put that on the street, ask some passerbys if they have 5 spare minutes, try to see what works, what doesn't. Is it the right structure? Is it the right positioning for the screens? All of these sheets that you see obviously are digital screens here. And long story short, we put the idea to the test without investing lots of money. It was cardboard, €0 invested here. Or this one here, service simulations. That is actually an image from Lufthansa that put their new business class to the test before starting to build it. So it was real-time simulations, 10 hours simulation of how life in the new business class would look like. Try to find potential flaws, potential or things that might go wrong at an early stage, as simple as that. Obviously, realizing that isn't a simple thing always, but it's about bringing your ideas to the test before you start working with these. Or a desktop walkthrough, something that some of you might have already done. This one here is from a workshop we did in Amsterdam. Also, it was about guiding people through the city, finding ways on how to manage visitor flows in the cities. We did that once with a skiing area here in Austria, where I still remember it, where that architect was invited as well. On day one, he was standing like this, like, I'm doing this for 20 years. Of course, he was a good architect, but he never thought it through to the end. We just came up with scenarios, tried to find out what could possibly go wrong by just walking around the plan with some Lego figures, just in order to, at an early stage, find out what could go wrong or what is nice already. Obviously, there's always the positive side to it as well. In the end, what you did is you gathered the data, building on that, you've came up with proper ideas, you put them to the test, you find out, hey, that prototype works, let's go and implement that idea. Let's invest into this idea / prototype. And then this is where the circle, so to say, closes. Hooray, service design happened, we are all happy, business is saved. No. Usually that is where the real struggle actually only begins. Implementation, what does that actually even mean? Often what you see is lots of models, lots of ideas, lots of things to follow. Use this process and you will get from A to B in a proper way, means from the idea you had into proper implementation, which then not only means delivering your service in general, but aligning your teams on that new approach, including the right stakeholders, balancing their interests, their needs, and in the end, most importantly, understanding the benefits that come for your customer. That is maybe something that you have already seen, the squiggle. That is how that is often communicated. You might struggle in the beginning, try to find the right data, try to find the right ideas, coming up with proper prototypes, and in the end, being able to deliver something that is of high value for your customers and subsequently your business. The reality actually often rather looks like that. You might first feel like, hey, we're on the right track. Then you run into new data gaps, you investigate a little bit, you then at a later point still come up with a good idea, and suddenly the organization kicks in. Management not sharing your thought here, organizational structures that prevent you to get buy-in from the right people and the like. This is actually what the reality would look like. So let's quickly talk a little bit about processes, or in particular standard process versus process standard. What does that mean? The first one, Google it if you haven't seen that already, the squiggle. Let's call that realistic one the mayhem, or let's call it the maze, the bow tie, the plate, the curtain, the fountain. What is he trying to say? Good question. This is often what we hear. We see these visualizations, and especially in a workshop context, often people work with these models. Of course, models provide you with a certain level of guidance, but there is one big threat. You might start thinking that this is the only way to get from A to B, or in other words, to realize what we're trying to achieve. So that might be a workshop, a one-day workshop. Some of us might have experienced that already. So there's a specific challenge ahead of us. We prepare, we then do some current state journey mapping, system mapping. We develop the key insights that you've just seen on a previous slide. Then we go into ideation techniques like 10+10. We then create an idea portfolio, cluster these ideas, rate them on their feasibility and impact on CX. We then go into prototyping. At the end of the day, we present our ideas, document that. And what often happens then, people leave and nobody remembers what you actually did 3 days later. The ideas or your journey maps land up on in a drawer or into some subfolder in your intranet, whatever then applies to your business. That is unfortunately often what we see. Or you do a 5-day design sprint, just, you know, making things a little bit bigger, so to say. So you do proper research in the beginning, you again collect the data, you build a research wall, you then go into journey mapping again, you add even more ideation techniques, go into really, really proper prototyping. As you see here, then you analyze again, you update, you iteratively work on that. And on day 5, you then go into creating a business model canvas in order to learn what's the real impact on your business, what's to expect, what return on investment are we going to see, and the like. You again document, and then you spend 5 days instead of 1. You might have valuable ideas, that's not what I'm saying, but often you did not think about how to best implement that. So as a general rule, I would say, don't trust that one process. Or in other words, don't only build on one of these things. I'm not saying that a 5-day design sprint is not valuable. What I'm saying is that you also have to ensure at the end of these things to find ways of properly implement what your findings into your daily business, into the future perspective of your business. Means you should not only design good services, you should also focus on designing the process itself. What does that mean? Regarding the time, maybe I speed up a little bit, but never mind. So it might be a double diamond that you follow. You might find things like that, just a different way of visualizing things. There are lots of activities in research, ideation, prototyping, implementation, but ask yourself the question, which are the right ones for me and my organization? Should I do it just because the book says I need to do it? Or maybe should I rather look out for something that fits my organization structure, culture a little bit better, as all of these things obviously come with lots of different possibilities. And I guess we all agree on the fact that nobody will be able to do all of that. So first of all, of course, you need to have the knowledge in order to understand what you potentially could do. The big magic then, so to say, is picking the right things. And the right things has, let's simply say, 2 different perspectives. A is what I just said. It needs to fit your organization. And on the other hand, obviously, it should be the right ones to achieve your goal, building on what I've just said. So having all of these things, is that the freedom all of us are talking about in design thinking? or does it rather result in anarchy? It's basically on you as a service designer or innovation manager or whatever it says in your email signature to find the right way through that channel. And in order to ensure that, you might need more structure than you think. Workshop facilitators might be feeling the pain already here, even though that's only dealing with a small part of service design. As I dare to say, 95% of service design isn't a workshop. The real work, the hard work only begins afterwards. So the more people you have and the more freedom you want, the more structure you will need. One idea on that structure is basically the journey map hierarchies that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Before I'm doing that, let's talk about this one here. I know that some of you are in consulting or are planning to go into consulting, so don't feel offended. It's not against consulting itself. It's about how we do that. We did it as well. We spent years in doing consulting and we still coach our customers. And also us, sometimes we fall into these common pitfalls. So just because I'm talking about that doesn't mean we're immune to that. But let's dive right into that. Often when trying to come up with a way to run your service design project, your innovation process, you will often run into different models, like the double diamond. These models give you orientation, and they are great when it comes to that. They are great when it comes to giving you a rough idea of what's ahead of you. Then blindly following these might not be what you want to do. So the double diamond, the one you see here, most of you might be familiar with that, and I talked about it earlier already. So you diverge twice, you open up, and then you converge, you nail it down, you nail down the actual problem that might be hidden behind what users even tell you. We're running into that constantly. People reaching out to us, users reaching out to us saying, hey, we need this and that data integration into your software. You've heard it often enough. You think, okay, that is what we need to do. You develop that feature, and then suddenly nobody's using it because what they were trying to achieve was hidden behind what they said. They didn't even know themselves. So proper research will help you to make these right decisions. Or let's have another look at this model here. I've presented it to you in the beginning, right? Research, ideation, prototyping, implementation, success. Hooray. Is it really that easy? Is it only that these 4 clear steps that I need to follow? Or is it 5 phases that I need to undergo? Or is it 7 definite stages that lead me to success? Models. Another one. Often you see these things, or at least I personally recently ran into this quite often when working with our enterprise customers. Even more impressive models from here to there, and a circle here, a loop there. And then once we get there, we can go into the next loop. But often these models don't give you the flexibility you need. What if I need to go back from the very end to the beginning? That model wouldn't allow me to do so. There is no path that really brings me back into research. So I dare to say you should be skeptical about these. Not ditching these ideas. They give you orientation. They provide you with proper ideas on how to conduct your projects. But ask yourself if that is really the truth, or if that's just something that guides you. Don't strictly blindly follow these models. That is the short version of what I'm trying to say. And on top of that, even if you use these models, and I'm not saying you should not do that, but at least try to find the right activities. What is the right activities? These are the activities that fit your organization, that fit your teams, your resources, your budgets, the time you have, the hierarchy that is given in your organization, and the like. Means it's on you to also design the process that leads to success. Just running into a model, following that, doing that, and then expecting the outcome to be the best you've ever created, that won't work. Have a deep dive into what you can potentially do. And if even something is a proved method, if it doesn't apply to your challenge or organization, at least don't do it right away. find ways on how to make things happen properly. So in other words, these activities should be suitable and feasible within your organization and regarding everything that I've just said. In other words, adapt to real world constraints when trying to tackle specific challenges. When to finally give it a go, there is no golden rule. And that is another part of the magic that you need to make happen as an innovator, as a service designer, evolving or coming up with a feeling, with a taste for when something is good enough. Because what applies to innovation in general or to designing things applies to designing the process as well. At a certain point, you need to give it a go and be willing to adapt, be willing to iterate on that process as well. No project can be planned end to end. No matter how good your plan and your project map and whatnot, no matter how good it is, reality will always kick in sooner or later. There will always be something going wrong, and you need to prepare for that. Preparing for the right scenarios, picking the right activities, aligning them with what is possible in your organization will help you make a proper start. So always ask yourself, when is it good enough? When are we ready to kick it off? Obviously, that's a hard thing to do. And building on that, and especially when working with our enterprise customers over the past years, we also found out that we need to come up with an idea that helps them use the artifacts they create in our software. Again, personas, stakeholder maps, and journey maps, but journey maps in particular. So helping them to find a way to not only create deliverables, shiny pieces that you then once present and then everybody forgets about these within the week, but finding ways of using these artifacts differently.
Michael, before you proceed further, I thought this would be a good time to answer this question. So which Shruti has highlighted. How to analyze which features should belong to the MVP? Should it completely depend on the priorities of the stakeholder? So, so it would be a good question to answer at this point.
Well, I would say, of course, there is not the one answer to that. Maybe I can tell a little bit about what we experience in our own organization, as we obviously try to practice what we preach and include not only our customers, but stakeholders at an early stage when it comes to the development and delivery of new features. So the question is a hard one, which should go into or belong to the MVP and whatnot. The only thing to really find out is bringing it to the test at an early stage, as I previously said. So we create click dummies. We do that. In our organization, we do that in Figma, for example, then invite our customers, let them experience it. And then we not only ask about, did you find the button that we want you to find? So we're not focusing too much on the UI only or the UX, but really try to go into conversations regarding the overall customer experience, CX, meaning we in these conversations try to find out, okay, what you just did, first of all, how usable was it? But then also going into that into a discussion that deals with the value of that, and also asking at an early stage if you then will be able to do that with our software. What would you do with the result?
So Michael, another question follow up to this would be, at this stage, do you think when you're testing the MVP, would it be a good time to involve the management? Because at the end of the day, the budgets have to be passed by them. So what is it based on your experience or the way you see customers using Mrtp?
I guess part of that will be answered in the next part when I talk about journey map operations. That's always a critical question, when to bring in management. You need, what I would always recommend is well, it depends on the maturity of your organization when it comes to design thinking. Is that something people are already familiar with? Is it not? Which then will also define how, if you push or if you pull, for example, for service design, not only a specific outcome already, but for that mindset. Without the mindset, you will struggle to communicate value. Plus, on top of that, make sure to define a return on investment, because often, out of my own experience, depending on your organization, of course, but especially often when management even hears the word design, they have a totally wrong perception of what that means, right? They then think about these creative people running around, throwing Post-its onto a wall, and in the end, never delivering anything that can be measured with a euro or dollar sign, so to say. I know I'm over exaggerating a little bit here, but what I want to say is define a return on investment and create some early success stories if design thinking isn't really deeply embedded in your organization yet. Start with your employees, for example. Create stories, success stories within your organization that you then can use to firstly pitch for the idea of design thinking and the benefits that come with that approach, and only then go into the actual real challenges, so to say, within your organization. Because if you didn't do that work before, you will always struggling to sell an idea or project to management if they don't see the value, and the value is partly a monetary one, and obviously also how this can strengthen your organization's position on the market. But I do have some parts of that in the next chapter here that I'm going to talk about.
Thanks, Michael. You could take us through the journey map operations.
Oh, by the way, as it maybe applies, if you're interested in these topics, on our blog, smrtp.com/blog, you will find a section with white papers. We've written 2 white papers on how to embed and scale design thinking in an organization. So maybe these papers might be of interest to you. 10 tips each on how to make it happen. So maybe you will find some more answers in these papers as well. All right, then let's dive into journey map operations. Ooh, wrong screen. Here you go. So maybe that's a nice connection point here. What do leaders expect of service design, or however you call it, design thinking, human-centered design? Pick your preferred term here. Customer experience actually is a not so new battlefield anymore. I intentionally use these old numbers just to show that this didn't pop up in the past 2 or 3 years. 6 years ago, 2015, building on a Gartner research, it's 89% of companies expected to compete on the basis of customer experience, compared to 36% in 2012. Also, again, we're talking about the return on investment here. Over the last 10 years, design-led companies outperformed the Standard & Poor's by an extraordinary 211%, or in other in a visualized way, based on a McKinsey study here. That is what proper design can do. So maybe sometimes you need to pitch for these things first before really selling a project to management, or at least use it as a driver in order to get the buy-in. And here I'm talking a little bit about organizations for which design thinking is rather a new thing to do. But design does not only mean, as previously said, being creative in a workshop and doing some nice exercises and throwing some stickies onto the wall. It is done for a purpose, and that is often what is misunderstood, as simple as that. We in service design, we know why we're doing that, but often you need to pitch for service design or design thinking and its method and tools first before you really tackle your projects. That is what I wanted to say by that. And often service design is mistaken for digital transformation. Thorsten Dirks, the former CEO of Telefonica Germany, said this sentence once in a talk we've attended. He said, when you digitize a shitty process, you will have a shitty digital process. So don't digitize for the mere sake of doing so, but really review what you're doing, review your projects. Is it really what helps us solving the customer's problem? Or is it just for the mere sake of digitizing something? Often things become even worse afterwards. Could tell you quite a bunch of stories from our customer base here when they just simply transferred a pen and paper form into a digital one. That is not what innovation means. That is not what service design is here for. Wrong direction, sorry. Think about visiting a website nowadays. Until you get to the part that you actually plan to read, there is lots of stuff to do, and mostly that's pretty annoying. This is part of your customer's experience too. If they go to your website, if they need to tick off 20 different things before they even start to find or try finding the information they are looking for, that shapes your customer experience as well. These tiny things, often the pain points, are to be found in a very, very granular level of your service. Don't forget about these things. Don't innovate on the onboarding process. What is that? Where does it start? Where does it end? What details to regard, which not? And that is where journey map operations come into the game. So let's talk about different use cases of journey maps first. The first one, most of us are familiar with that, workshop maps. Often pen and paper, especially in non-pandemic times, but also you might do that on a Miro board. They are often highly visual, often kick off a specific project, or at least help you, remember some of the earlier slides of mine, help you to trigger a project or to dive into the status quo. On top of that, there are project maps. As the name tells, these then usually deal with a specific challenge, often are much more data-driven, much more research-based, ideally, lots of KPIs, lots of qualitative insights. Often you iteratively work on these, or ideally you should do that. And on top of that, there are management maps. Management maps often represent the customer lifecycle. And also these management maps usually sum up the most important pieces coming from more detailed maps below. And you might have guessed it already, I'm talking about different zoom levels. Before I show you what I mean, let's also talk about this one here. Be aware when doing your journey maps, or not be aware, let's say the other way around. If you want to slip into your customer's shoes, try to really do so, which means don't have a look at touch points only. As previously said, I'm teaching at 2 business schools, and often my students have some knowledge about journey maps already, as they've heard about it in the marketing course, and then they hear touch points, touch point, touch points. Yeah, great. But what is a touch point? A touch point is one step in your customer's along your customer's journey, part of your customer's experience subsequently, in which they are interacting with your brand. But surprise, surprise, your customers do have a life. They do have things to do in between. Or in other words, they're also experiencing happening along their journey that might not include you and your organization. Think about this example here, air travel. If I'm the airline in this context, I do have specific touch points along that journey, right? These steps into which I'm interacting with my customer. And that, by the way, does not always have to be a live interaction. That does not have to be a face-to-face conversation. It might be information that I'm delivering through my app. It might be, in another context, only a poster they see on the wall that triggers interest in what I'm trying to sell, the event I'm organizing. All of these things are touch points, and often as an organization you are already aware of these. The big challenge is to find out what happens in between, so a rather product-centered journey map. As back to our air travel example here, there is much more happening, and we're still rather on a high level here. You arrive to the airport, you gather in, or you try to find out where the right gate is, you go to check-in, you then go through passport checks, you wait, sometimes in a business lounge or whatever, then you wait for the boarding, you board your plane. I think we're familiar with the idea of flying. But if I would be your manager now and say, okay, we need to improve. Tell me where in this journey would we need to improve, and what is it that we're going to do? So let's improve at the airport experience. That is what's covered in this map. Well, what to say then? What do you do? How does that feed into the overall experience? What projects can we do? Which ones should we prioritize? So I'm giving you the answer. But first of all, think about these things, or at least have them in mind. There is stuff happening that you might not be able to directly influence, but you might find ways to deliver information, for example, at an earlier point in order to prevent your customers from running into that. That is why these experienced focused journey maps are so important. Don't focus on touch points only, and don't get intrigued by what often is called the digital journey. Of course, it's important to measure the performance of the emails and the content within that you're sending. Of course, it's important to measure how your call center performs. But on top of that, try to understand what is happening in between, because often the potential to innovate is not tied to these touch points only. And when we talk about the digital journey, your customers aren't machines. They aren't digital humans only. They do have a life in between. So they do things that are non-digital. Be aware of these things. That's just a nice starting point. And then I kind of pointed to that several times already. First of all, start doing your journey maps on multiple Zoom levels. And hooray, my geographical background comes into play here again. Compare that with geographical maps. The more you zoom out, let's say you have a map or a world map. Let's keep it simple. You see where the continents are. You see, ideally, you see the nation's borders. You might see the capital cities, but you don't see any details. If I want to find out more about cities in India, I need to zoom in. The same applies to journey maps. So I might have a map of India, then I see the different districts, regions, depending on the type of map, I might see elevation levels and the like. So much more details. But that map still doesn't help me if I want to find a specific street in Mumbai. So I need to zoom in even further. Much more details reveal. But the zoomed in maps also have a disadvantage. I might find the right street, but I have no idea in which part of the planet I'm currently am if I don't have the context. Means the same idea you can apply to journey maps. Do journey maps on multiple zoom levels. From a high level map, as previously said, and let's stick with our air travel example here, from that high level, often customer lifecycle, true for every type of customers. This doesn't matter if I'm a business traveler or leisure traveler. There's a trigger. My boss tells me to go, or I want to go on annual leave together with my family and go to whatever island to spend 2 weeks there. There's a trigger point. Then I gather information, I book the trip, I prepare. We talked about that. But as said, where should I start innovating when it comes to CX? Is it the airport? Is it the orientation? Where are the pain points to be found? So let's zoom in a little bit into the airport experience. And that's what you've just seen previously. Another separate journey map revealing more details. In this map, I don't care what happens before the customer arrives at the airport, and I don't care what happens after they are airborne. But as said, I see more details already. But still, what should I innovate on? Is it where are the pain points located? So I might want to zoom in even further and zoom into the boarding experience. Thus, or this revealing or leading to micro journeys. That might be screen by screen how they use the boarding app or my app that I'm providing. That might be in tiny steps describing what happens at passport control. Because often innovation is to be found on these micro levels in the details. Obviously, then once you identify the pain points and potential to improve, you might want to think about what to do first. So multi-level journey mapping is a good start. And as you see, we have a hierarchy of maps here already, from zoomed out high-level maps to very detailed zoomed in maps. And obviously, if that does not necessarily need to result in 3 levels. Again, remember what I just said, just because I'm showing you 3 levels doesn't mean that's the only truth. Might be 5, might be 6. It really depends on your service, on your structure, on what you're trying to achieve, how deep you want to zoom in. But then the question will be, okay, now I do have these. How do I bring this into my everyday business, into my operational life? And that is where this really starts happening. That is, it's always nice to say we put the customer at the center. But how do I then manage that? And what does manage mean in this context? First of all, you will need people in charge of these maps. We call them journey map coordinators. If journey map managers apply better to your organization's way of talking, as simple as that, then call them differently. The idea here is that you have people in charge for one or several maps. These coordinators meet in journey map councils. In these councils, let's start here. These councils might happen quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily. Again, it depends on your organization. What then happens is that you have people assigned to one or several journey maps. What's the benefit of that? These coordinators make sure to bring in the right people in order to, depending on what you're just trying to do, gather more data, do your research, come up with the right ideas in order to tackle the pain points that you've identified, building the right prototypes, or in other words, or even further, they ensure that the right resources are given. That might mean not only the right people or teams, and that might be external stakeholders as well, like your consulting partners. It's also the data, the time, the budget. To define that and also subsequently define a return on investment here, you need to talk to others. Means in these councils, you make sure to, first of all, gather the right information, define what you're trying to achieve, and thus calculate a return on investment. That is what you can then use to report to your superior. That might be your CXO or CMO or whatever VP of whatnot. Means in these councils, or before you go into these councils, make sure that you have updated maps. What does that mean? First of all, check with people on the data that is in your maps. And very important here, review what projects in your organizations feed into what part of these journey maps. Is project A feeding into the at the airport project, or at the booking the trip one, or does it maybe help us with both? Is there something we're not doing yet? Is there a new project that needs to be triggered? All of that you learn if you keep your maps up to date. And up to date means doing research, going into ideation, maybe even at an early stage, and trying to find out what could we potentially do to improve on a specific thing that is represented on my journey map. So in these councils, you try to achieve or create an overview. Overview means, what are we currently doing? What are we trying to achieve? Which projects are we running already? Which projects aren't we running already? What do we need to make this happen? Where's the budget to be found? What's the time frame in which we need to do? Is there a specific sequence we need to tackle? Are there overlaps? Are there contradictions? I've ran a workshop with a German car manufacturer last year. Only in that workshop, they found out that after that, for 3 years, 2 different teams were working on the same project. They were in the same building, just 1 floor above each other. They didn't know about it. They wasted, I don't tell you the number. It's like ridiculous how much money was burned there just because nobody talked. They were totally profound on what design thinking is and how they drive innovation and what to do. Still, they burned lots of money as people never talked to each other. They didn't have the platform to do so. Dare to pause a project. Just because you got to a certain point already, you got quite far, doesn't mean you need to bring it to an end. If it's not impacting CX in the way you want it to do, stop it. Start over again, do more research. If you find out, hey, the idea seems to be good, the prototype seems to work, but we're still not really sure if it tackles the right problem, dare to go back into research. And I know that this is hard, especially the bigger an organization, the more you might have to fight for that. But these councils allow you to have the right platform as you include your management at that point already. They will be able to tell by the artifacts that you provide, the journey maps, persona, stakeholder maps, to make these decisions. What are the real pain points? Not only for my customers, but also for my employees. No good employee experience, no good customer experience, as simple as that. If people struggle to deliver within your organization, if they don't feel valued, they will not be able to deliver the customer experience you want to see. Create a roadmap, a backlog. document your decisions, find ways to properly manage your projects. In our organization, we do triple track management, but that doesn't mean that this is the only way to do that. Update your roadmap, visualize things, update your portfolio, and define who is in charge. And don't blame it on the one at the end of the food chain. Include your management, get buy-in, define responsibilities, define the return on investment. I know I'm repeating myself, but it is so important. And reflect on your organizational framework and not only the responsibilities, as it said here, but also reflect on the possibilities that your organization allows for. Means if you're in these councils, find out that your structures don't allow you to go or to tackle a project, you might want to discuss if you need to change something here first in order to ensure that the projects you then trigger serve the right purpose, or at least lead you to the right goals that you wanted to achieve. And after each councils, these coordinators again are in charge of updating your maps. Data might change, numbers might change, insights might change over time. They should update the project statuses, not only the maps, but also have an overview on the status quo of your projects. How far did we get? What did we run into? How is that reflected? How does that tie to other projects? Is it influencing other projects, or is that project I'm currently focusing on independent from others? All of these things are necessary in order to ensure that you do the right things at the right time. And journey maps can help you do that because they are visualization tool. We are visual beings. We are dependent on what we see. So in the end, that is what you're trying to do. You not only keep a repository of artifacts, personas, stakeholder maps, journey maps, or service blueprints, or whatever you do, but subsequently you automatically keep a repository of data. By having people in charge, the coordinators, you make sure that you update your maps constantly. Again, it's important to do that on a research-based building on a research-based approach. Never invest in assumptions only. And maybe even most importantly, coordinate all projects with a CX impact. And just because you think a project might not directly impact CX, it might still be an important one. Think about the processes, everything that happens behind the curtain backstage. In order to ensure that, obviously, you need to talk, and that means meet regularly. By doing that, you will create the same language across teams, silos, departments, pick your term. You ensure that the right tools and the same tools are being used in order to achieve your goals, and people share the same perspective across silos and through different hierarchy levels. So in the end, journey maps suddenly become a customer-centric management tool. You go beyond the mere creation of visual deliverables, but use these maps in a way that is the most beneficial, and that is using these maps in order to do what I've just talked about. So in the end, always have in mind what people want. They don't want service design. People want their problem solved. And that is true for your customers, for your co-workers, for your employees, for your citizen patients, whatever industry you're in. And yes, it might sound a little bit trivial, but that is actually what we're doing, because often just Google service design and this is what you see, right? I'm not saying you should not do this, but this is often what comes to our mind at first. Oh yeah, a nice workshop. This will be fun. It will be entertaining. We do a little bit of brainstorming. Yeah, millions of post-its. Great. And yeah, we'll have tools and somebody will guide us through that. And of course, it will help you to get insights. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. This is only where it starts. Doing these fun workshops is obviously a nice employee experience too. But remember that these things only trigger the actual work that is to come afterwards. So please don't fall into that pitfall, into that trap of following these models, of doing these fancy workshops only. This is not how you manage CX. This is maybe how you spark something, but this is not where the work ends. This is only where the work begins. So in the end, I guess we need to change the narrative of service design, creating an understanding for what it's good for. And in particular, and I was talking only about some methods and tools in service design, but at least I am of the opinion that persona, stakeholder maps, and journey maps are one of the most accessible ones, and thus use these to trigger what you want to see, and that is innovation done properly in the organization. And no matter how you call it, remember you're designing services and systems. Means be sure to create the right processes before you tackle creating the right services that fit your customers' expectations, and subsequently make sure to not only create deliverables, but find a way that allows you to manage maps and projects alike. And that is what I tried to tell you about when presenting customer journey map operation. And yeah, I would say let's call this good enough for today. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Michael. Now, I would invite the participants to ask their questions. You can ask to unmute yourself, and I'll do that. Kanchan, you had raised some questions, so why don't you unmute yourself and ask it yourself?
Hey, thank you so much for giving me a chance, Dr. Vidya. Basically, I just loved every part of what Michael spoke about. And I'm also a beginner in service design, and I've been working on UX design since last 15 years. And I'm now slowly moving towards service design, which is not really tied to digital experiences all the time. So the first project that I'm about to jump onto is about the employees' performance enhancement within the organization. So I'm suspecting there is not going to be much research to be done, because what I get to listen from them is how their day-to-day work happens, and how actually do they want to improve their enhance their performance through, like, how to solve their internal problems. I'm kind of trying to figure out how to give the proposal to the client, basically, because I cannot see many things far ahead in the journey, because I can't really see the details unless I start talking to them, and that comes only after I start the project. And I'm like, kind of, it's like the catch-22 situation where I'm not able to judge how do I actually start, and how do I actually present them the proposal, and the timeline, and the cost, and everything. So that's one of the practical problems, actually. May not be directly connected with journey mapping, which is the topic of the today's call, but this is something that I'm really struggling with. If you could help me on that just a bit.
I'll try. Of course, there is not that one approach that always applies, and I know that I'm repeating myself, but it's really important to say that. And I hear the story you're telling also from our agency partners. We do have a network of established consulting partners, as that's not the work that we do, but that's usually the partners that we then bring in. And often they say it's really hard to communicate the value of what needs to be done and find the right starting point. I wouldn't say that things are so obvious often. Often also, its employees see them as if you would say a customer. Often what they state as being a problem is not the actual one. So if it's about employee experience, the same thing applies. And that is also how you can structure your proposal. Make sure, and that I'm not saying that you should not follow the models at all. I'm just saying that you should not strictly follow them. Means you can, of course, build on these things and say, hey, in order to find out what's really needed, we need to do some research first before we actually trigger the project. That is work for you as well. Because often if you overpromise the custom experience you're creating with that is not the one you want to see. It's about defining, it's about nailing that problem down. And that is often what organizations fail in. And often they will try to push you saying, like, we know what it is. At least try to find references that prove that this is not the case. This is often what our agency partners do, because the starting is often the hardest part in the game. And they say, hey, from previous work, we've learned that this and that will happen. Or have a look at, or ask them provocative questions often, depending on who you're talking to in the organization. But it's like, do you really know how the day of people in your of an employee in your call center looks like? Do you know what they're struggling with? Do you know how their interaction with the actual customer looks like? What what their insights are? Do you have channels to learn from these front desk people what is actually going wrong? What are the main topics? What channels are you using? Where do you keep that repository of insights? Can you show me how you prove these problems that you're talking about, or that you know so well? And often these are questions where people already start thinking, saying like, well, no. That is often what you hear. I've made that experience, and our agents and partners do the same. Just saying, yeah, being provocative at a certain point. Of course, that don't overdo it, but often asking the right questions, pointing to that of the non-existence of these repositories is already a good start.
Okay, so I hear that probably we need some little bit of discovery even before we start engaging in a formal way. And unless we get to do that, it's not wise to really get into the details of how the deliveries would be done. But right now, the company that I'm going to work with in this particular project doesn't have anything to do with anything digital. So they're all like a setup management thing in large 5-star hotels with their kitchen management and things like so. Much of the staff is labor category. So I don't think they have anything formal as such to account for or something to draw inferences from. So there, I think I'll really have to go through their books and other verbal commitments that they give to each other, and where the overlaps happen, and only after that maybe I'll be able to give any formal kind of a thing. And then the journey map would start right at their experience level where they interact with each other and all of that. So yeah, this is what I take from you.
I mean, also journey maps will help you to sharpen the focus already. For example, often these discussions rather soon go into the direction of discussing existing processes, backstage processes. What are we doing? How do structures look like? What do people have to do in order to achieve A and B internally? And often then the discussion goes into the wrong direction right from the start, because it's not the customer in the center, but you lose yourself in discussing things like, hey, yeah, we won't be able to do that because our software does not allow to. It might be true, but if the software doesn't allow to, do we along that journey, maybe earlier, maybe later, find potential to deliver still in a good way, accepting that the software they currently have, whatever back office system or whatnot, doesn't allow for that? If it doesn't, well, not so ideal, but maybe you find potential to tackle the problem from a different angle. In the end, obviously, processes should follow experience and not the other way around. And that is the mindset you need to create first. Absolutely
amazing. Thank you so much for the guidelines. I would try to get onto them and find my way. Thank you so much, Michael.
Very welcome.
So does anyone else have any questions? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Shruti, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shruti, and I am really happy with the questions Kanchan asked, because it helped a lot of us here. And so I am in the business since like 3 to 5 years now, into UI and UX, and finding my way through the definition of service design, as I must say. So the thing here is that right now, currently, I'm working in an edtech company, and I do have some freelance projects going on here and there. So the thing is that people do not actually pretty much understand the importance of research, and because it takes a lot of money to do that, they are not pretty much inclined towards getting their own data. So at the end of the day, we have to compromise and buy some data sets, okay, that's done from different kinds of data analysts, and that might not directly apply to the problems that we have, but we have to take the inference from that. So my question here is that usually I deal with these kind of people and these kind of data. Creating a visualization map or a journey map with that is pretty tricky, because you cannot rely on that data on that certain touch point, if I must say. So how do I get to the gist of it? Because even though people do have some heat maps and stuff like that, so when we are into the process of revamping something, they already do have a collection of data that's related to their brand, and we do have the other data sets. So I need to find the median between the two and then try and pave the path for the future maps. So what do you think can help
Mm,
you?
well, maybe what I hope that tackles your challenge here, but what I would do, think about what I was talking about earlier when it came to triangulation, right? Triangulation of data types, of methods, and of research teams. Even if you buy data that you then use, what's often happening there is that, or let's keep it general, no matter where you got the data from, often journey maps are built on that one piece of data only, right? You have that data, it allows you to slip into your custom shoes to a certain degree. You then start building these journey maps, and then you think that is it. So triangulation also means to tackle things from a different angle as well. Maybe you have that data, but maybe you might have other resources as well, whatever these resources might be, old data, or you talk separately to the people at the front desk, to pick up the example previously mentioned. Means try to find out of if the journey maps that you create from coming from both sides really show the same thing, kind of squeezed into the data that you have and not the other way around. The data you get should prove what is there, or should counter prove on data that you've already used. Which means that is what I recently did with a pharma customer of ours. They said, like, yeah, we're doing that for 30 years, and that's our journey maps. We already did them 10 years ago. And I said, like, you know what? Let's talk again in 2 months. At least find somebody that has the resources to and not and doesn't know these journey maps, try to recreate them, to see if they still match. If there are overlaps, at least that's a little indicator that these things are still true. But where they differ, these two types of maps, that is usually where you should trigger another round of research. Because often people say no to research, and especially budgets for research at an early stage, because we did it once. But just think about how often things renew. That might happen internally. You have that it often is people related, new manager, new take. Or think about communication channels, how fast they pop up and disappear again. Is it really the right? Is it still the truth, or is it not? And that is only what you can only find out about this if you independently try to prove what's on the one side, diving into it from a different perspective. And different perspective might be a different set of data, or at least showing what you have to an audience that have not been concerned with that yet. Get these independent opinions. That is maybe a too simple way to frame it, but I hope you know what I mean. It's like there are usually cheap ways to do that without needing to dedicate an entire team in order to redo the research. Maybe define where are the real pain points, and only dive into these things, like the pain points we saw 3 years ago, and that's the data that proves it. Is that part still true? If so, okay, then at least that's a nice indicator that the data is still valuable. But if you find contradictions there, that is usually something you can then use to at least get approval for a further round of research. But in the end, I fully do understand what you mean. Often there is no time, no budget for that. But then you need to play the game from a different angle and say, okay, this is the artifact we created. This is the journey map. This is the data that proves it. But hey, our support desk currently reports that this and that is a new topic to pop up. We don't have data for that. So if that is not given our data set, it might happen that lots of other things are not given there too. So you need to often go into that tiny steps, one step forward, one step backward. There is no golden rule. That's unfortunately the truth. But maybe some of the people in here can share different stories on how these things happen in their organization. I'm not the only expert here.
So Kimberly, would you like to share something or ask a question? Because I see that you have put on the video and unmuted.
Yeah, maybe presentable at this point, whereas I wasn't earlier. Yeah, I don't have anything to add so much to the previous question, but I do have another question, if that's all right. It's about the journey coordinators, the journey map coordinators in the council. Like that seems like a very important part of the implementation process from your point of view, or you wouldn't have put it out here. And then the different levels of maps, really amazing, sounds really rigorous, but it also sounds like a journey in itself to have gotten there. So can you talk about the challenges in setting up something like that, and maybe some wisdom around how we might get there modestly?
Yeah. First of all, and that builds on our own internal experiences, plus the experience of some of the customers we're working with that already managed to do so. Don't go in big right from the beginning. Define a smaller scope, whatever defines your scope. That might be a specific a business unit, that might be a specific use case, that might be a specific challenge that you're already facing. Then think who you already have, who has access to the data you might need. That is always a good start to see, okay, who can provide me with that data? Obviously, then you need to define, is that also the right person or team, or person in particular, most often, that can fill out this role. Means, do they have the right connections? Do they see acceptance within their own organization? Regarding your current hierarchies and teams and organizational structure plays an important role in that, to find the right people to do that. And you don't necessarily need a coordinator for everything right from the beginning. Try to define a specific challenge, as said, try to start small, show that it works, and then only then scale it. Because if you suddenly go into your organization and you have some, I don't know how many thousand employees, and design thinking is just on the rise, but not a really established mindset yet. If you then say, so, and now I need 100 coordinators, people will go into defense mode, saying like, oh, come on, I have so much stuff to do already, and now I should be a coordinator for these things as well. That is what you see when you don't properly prepare for that. So you really need to see, where can I maybe create first success stories? Where can I easily prove that it works? And then, same as with what you're trying to deliver, the CX in the end, try to find smaller success stories first, and from there scale it. If you go in too big, it will fail. So maybe do it within the team first, maybe do it within the marketing team or whatever. Just saying like, okay, we need people in charge now for one is social media management, and the other one is for point of sale and what not. And let's see how we can manage to coordinate things better in this context before we start scaling it throughout the organization. As said, if you throw it onto people without showing these step-by-step success stories, this won't work out as well. People are always afraid of change, and that is especially true for employees. So you need also to show a benefit for that. You need to show a return on investment internally as well. You need to point to the benefits in regard of how much money you can save, how much time you can save, how efficiently you can work afterwards, and what the benefit might be. More time for other projects might be less frustration, however you define that. But as said, start small and then scale it from there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Well, we just have, in case Michael is fine, one last question, because we already half an hour over the agreed schedule. As all of you are here, I'm sure you're here because you're still interested to learn more and more. The topic is a Pandora's box, believe me. So if anyone has the last question, please unmute yourself. In the meanwhile, I've also shared the link for Service Design Network. Those who are not members of Service Design Network, you may want to become a member. There's a huge repository of learnings that's available out there, and you can connect with people across the globe who would be more than happy to share and help you in whatever way they can. We will at India, we also keep conducting webinars on a regular basis. We also have a WhatsApp group. So if anyone would like to be a part of the group, when we share the recording, we will be sharing the link to the WhatsApp group as well. So you may add yourself. Believe me, we keep it strictly restricted only to things related to service design, We don't spam you with other stuff, but relevant content which we feel might be relevant for you. So they want to be a part of that. Our next upcoming webinar is going to be on design ethics. So we will be very shortly announcing that. So those who are interested, we would be happy to have you and learning to all of us. Any last questions? Priyanka, Rancha, if not,
sorry.
Yeah, Michael.
I just wanted to say, if these questions might pop up at a later point, feel free to drop me a line. It's simply michael@morethanatmetrics.com. You will see the email address in the slides then as well. Also, if you want to give Smaply a shot, or if I can show you, or one of my team can show you how that is to be realized in that piece of software, reach out to us, and I'll be happy to further any kind of conversations deriving from today.
Yeah, I'm also sharing his email ID on chat in case you didn't get it. I'm also sharing my email ID. So in case anyone wants to reach out to know more about service design network, or generally catch up and network, I'm happy to chat.
Also just added the URL to our blog. You will find more on journey map preparations and hierarchies there, plus much more on service design related topics.
With them, Michael, if you don't mind, on chat.
Sorry, I sent a direct message. Here we go. Now I've who did I send it to? Some was the lucky one.
Okay.
Raf, was it? This is it. Here you go.
Okay, yeah, there you have it. So in case you want to check out, in fact, they also have a free version of the tool. So who want to play around with the tool can do that. So it's not necessary that you have to pay to become a user of Smaply.
Exactly.
So yes, thank you so much, Michael. I mean, I'm sure each one of us has some learning. I mean, however experienced we might be in this field. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.
And we will be sharing the recording shortly with you with the links. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Stay safe, take care, and it would be great to be in touch. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.